Welcome back to our wildlife photography series by ORYX Photo Tours. In episode 1, we laid down foundations, going over basic camera modes and settings that you'll need to start your journey. In today's episode, we're going into one of the most important and sometimes confusing aspects of photography, shutter speed. Now, it might all sound rather technical, but it's really about choice. Shutter speed decides whether we freeze a moment in razor-sharp detail or allow motion blur into the frame to tell a bigger story. Whether it's a leopard leaping across a tree or the gentle sway of a river, shutter speed determines how motion is captured in the frame. And if you get it right, your image can come alive. Get it wrong, and you'll either end up with blurry photos or images that lack energy. So let's break down what shutter speed really is, how to use it, and how it can completely transform your wildlife photography. Shutter speed is the length of time your camera shutter is open, allowing light to hit the sensor. Think of it like blinking. A fast blink, just a fraction of a second, freezes everything you're looking at. However, a slower blink, holding your eyes open, lets in more light, but if something moves, you'll see it as a blur. In photography, shutter speeds are measured in a fraction of a second, like 1/1000, 1/500, a 60th, or even in full seconds. The faster the shutter speed, the less light enters, but the sharper moving subjects will appear. The slower the shutter speed, the more light enters, but movement will blur. Now, why is this important in wildlife photography? Well, because wildlife rarely sits still. Birds take off, predators lunge, and even a subtle head movement can affect your image. Shutter speed gives you the control over whether you want to freeze the moment or allow it to blur, showing a sense of motion. Think of it this way. Shutter speed isn't just about exposure. It's about storytelling. Do you want to show the raw power of a herd of zebra crossing a river? Or do you want to show the energy of a herd of elephant by letting their movement streak across the frame? That choice is all in your shutter speed. The trade-off, of course, is light. The faster you go, the less you get. And that means having to balance with your ISO and aperture. We'll go into those in later episodes, but for now, know this. Freezing action is about anticipation, quick reflexes, and pushing your shutter speed fast enough to stop the wild in its tracks. What's powerful about freezing action is that it reveals moments that even the human eye can't register. At high shutter speeds, you're not just documenting, but unveiling a hidden world of detail and split-second drama. But remember, the faster the subject, the faster your shutter speed needs to be. A walking elephant might be sharp at 1/500, but a flock of quailias exploding from a tree will need 1/4000. In wildlife photography, most of the time we rely on faster shutter speeds, as they allow us to freeze a lion mid-roar, a bird taking off, or even just a giraffe walking, all crisp and clear. A good rule is to start with 1/1000 of a second or faster when shooting moving subjects. For birds in flight, I'll often push to 1/2000 or even 1/4000 to really lock in the detail. Because when photographing a subject like sprinting animals, these high speeds are the only way to truly freeze the blur of the legs. Now here's the fun part. Slow shutters aren't just for low light, they're for creativity. Motion blur. Sometimes the blur itself is the story. Buffalo surging through dust, elephants swinging their trunks, or wildebeest charging through a river. At a 15th of a second, it's chaos on purpose. The blur becomes a way to show energy and rhythm. Atmosphere at night. With the tripod, you can go to full seconds. Elephants ghosting under the stars at 2 seconds exposure tells you a mood that you'll never get at a 2000th of a second. Slow shutters at night can capture the movement of clouds, stars, or even fireflies, adding layers of atmosphere. The key with slow shutter work is experimenting. Most frames won't work, but the few that do have the potential to become the images that people remember most. And the beauty is that slow shutters give us the freedom to interpret wildlife in ways that are more emotional, more atmospheric, and sometimes more powerful than sharp shots ever could. Alright, let's put this into practice in the bush. Behind me I've got a herd of impala moving through, so firstly I'm going to lock in a fast shutter speed, like a 2000 of a second. Watch as they leap. Notice everything frozen. This is your classic textbook action shot. Now I'm going to dial down to an 80th of a second and try a panning shot. I'm going to track one impala as it runs, making sure my movement is steady and consistent. Notice how the subject stays relatively sharp while the background blurs into streaks. This instantly gives you a sense of energy and motion. Let's push it even further, down to a 20th of a second. Now the whole frame is chaos and it's a blur of movement and legs. Not all the images are going to work at this speed, but the ones that do are really artistic and abstract. And that's the beauty of it. One impala herd, one moment, but 3 totally different images, all because of shutter speed. That's why I encourage you, set aside a few minutes on every drive to practice. And don't just rely on the safe sharp shot. Push yourself. Blur, pan, experiment. Because over time, you'll train your eye, your timing, and your hands to move with the subject. And this will completely transform your wildlife photography. Before we wrap up, here are a few practical tips that will make mastering shutter speed easier out in the field. Tip 1. The minimum shutter speed rule. A good rule of thumb is to keep your shutter at least 1 over your focal length when shooting handheld. For example, if you're using a 400mm lens, don't go slower than 1/400th of a second. Otherwise, even tiny hand movements will blur your shot. Image stabilization helps, but it doesn't replace a solid shutter speed. Tip 2. Burst mode is your best friend. Wildlife moments happen in a fraction of a second. A fish eagle diving, a lion shaking of water, a bird taking off. If you only take one frame, you might miss the peak of the action. Shooting in a burst gives you a sequence to choose from, and often one frame will stand out with the perfect timing. Tip 3. Don't fear higher ISO. A sharp, slightly noisy photo is far better than a clean but blurry one. With modern cameras, noise is manageable in editing, but motion blur can't be fixed afterwards. Tip 4. Practice deliberately. Dedicate 5 minutes on every drive to try panning sequence or slow shutter blur. Most steps won't work, and that's okay. The few that do will elevate your portfolio, and the practice will train your eye and reflexes. If you remember these 4 points, you'll not only get more technically correct images, but you'll open the door to more creative photography. That's it for episode 2. Shutter speed is one of the most powerful settings in photography, and the more you practice it, the more instinctive it becomes. In the next episode, we'll dive into aperture and how it shapes the depth of field in wildlife photography. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you out in the field soon.